everyone. My name is Bob Sakaniwa. I'm the Director of Policy and Advocacy at Asian and Pacific Islander American Vote, APIAVote. We are so fortunate today to have one of our coalition partners, leaders really, with us today to talk to us a little bit more about language access and some of the background and current issues. Without any further ado, let me introduce you to our guest today. His name is Ruben Lebron. He's the Director of Voting Rights with Building Back Better Together Coalition. And through this coalition, he leads up a committee called the Language Justice Committee. Can you tell us a little bit more about the coalition there and who some of the players are, and then more specifically what the Language Justice Committee is about?
So Building Back Together was formed after the 2020 elections by senior Biden officials to promote the progressive policies of the Biden-Harris administration and communicate those to the American people. And as the voting rights director, it is my job to communicate everything that we're doing to protect the freedom to vote of Americans. And what we saw was a big gap in the language accessibility space, right? As you know, voting and elections can be a very complicated process by itself. But for folks whose first language is not English, or who are not born in the States, it can be even more difficult. So when you do not have assistance at the ballot, when you go to vote, it can be even more difficult. And sometimes you just decide to skip the process altogether. So because of that, because of the lack of funding, because of the lack of national coordination, last year we decided to launch the Language Justice Committee. And we're approaching actually the anniversary of that. So that's very exciting. And it is the first ever national coordinated effort at this scale to make sure that leaders in states and at the hyperlocal level are talking to each other, are sharing resources, best practices, and coordinating to make sure that the midterms in 2022 have greater language accessibility than ever before. But it was also timely because every 5 years, the Census Bureau is tasked with creating a list of the counties throughout the United States that are required under the Voting Rights Act to provide full language assistance to its voters, right? And when I mean full language assistance, I really do mean everything. So last year in December, the census released a list of almost 400 counties, Bob, that now needed to provide in-language materials for API, Hispanic, and Native voters in the language that they understand. And over 100 of those were new ones. So we know we needed a coalition that was working together to help implement those changes because, you know, we added so many counties that it was a little overwhelming. We needed to make sure that we were providing resources to election officials who are cash-strapped, right? And sometimes don't have the technical know-how to do this. So we brought in experts. We brought in some folks that have decades of experience in election administration, voting rights, even folks that have worked as election officials to this group. And I am proud to work with amazing partners such as APIAVote, Asian Americans Advancing Justice, MALDEF, Native American Rights Fund. We're working with SEIU, America Votes. We're working with Unidos US. We're working with so many great partners that are day in and day out, making sure that we're protecting the freedom to vote for all people in this country and that we have greater language accessibility in the upcoming midterms.
The law itself is part of the Voting Rights Act of 1965, contained in essentially in Section 203. Can you talk very briefly about Section 203?
So as you know, the Voting Rights Act is one of the landmarks legislations that this country has passed, and it did so during the Civil Rights Movement era. A few years after that, there were some amendments and the Voting Rights Act was updated, and it added Section 203, which basically makes sure that based on certain requirements, population requirements, right? If you reach a certain amount of people in your county that speak a language other than English, that county is required to provide all materials. That is ballots, bilingual poll workers, websites, voter registration forms in the language of that community. And the protected communities are Hispanic voters, AAPIA voters, and Native voters.
Are there jurisdictions that will take on these bilingual duties and requirements, even if they're not covered under Section 203?
Yes, there are. So election officials throughout the country understand the importance of allowing voters to vote in the language that they best understand. So many of them have taken it up on themselves to go beyond to what the Voting Rights Act requires and provide assistance to voters in other languages. Such is the case of jurisdictions in California who they actually passed their own legislation called the Voter Choice Act that has even stronger requirements for counties to provide in-language assistance. And such is the case of many, many states that have provided not only one, but 2 or 3 languages beyond what they're required to do because they understand the importance of this. New York just passed the John Lewis Voting Rights Act in the state, which has very strong language access requirements, and it's going to go from one of the states with the least amount of voting rights right to the top to make sure that folks are able to have a more accessible election in their hands. And that is exactly also the work that the Language Justice Committee is doing. We're working with a certain number of counties throughout the US that just missed being required to do this work by a few people. I'm talking about a dozen people, 100 people. And unfortunately, they need to wait until 2026 when the next round of requirements comes. So we're talking to election officials and we're leveraging with them, hey, you have these many people in your county, you're going to be required to do it in the future. Why don't we start implementing that now with at least having ballots translated and offering poll workers that are able to assist people in person.
It's encouraging to hear that some jurisdictions are doing the right thing, and the Language Justice Committee is encouraging other, very close jurisdictions, close to being covered jurisdictions, to do likewise. What are some of the other efforts of the Language Justice Committee in general?
We're doing a couple things. First is we're sending letters to every single county, introducing our work, our coalition, and offering to provide technical know-how. We're helping them translate materials. We're helping them design ballots. We're helping them connect with local community groups who are experts in that language. And we are connecting election officials and our partners to in language media, right? We need to make sure that we're not only doing this work, but we're letting voters know that this assistance is available so they don't stay home, they come out, they come vote. So that is one big part of what we're doing. But we're also doing great research in partnership with the UCLA Voting Rights Project, where we looked at every single website of all almost 400 jurisdictions to see the level of compliance, but also the quality of the materials that we're providing. Hey, we even called every single of these offices to see if they had workers that spoke the language they're required to do.
So as we kind of move through the primary season, I'm just wondering if in terms of trends, whether good trends or bad trends, have you been seeing things, hearing stories in the language access context? And if so, do you have an example or two of what's been happening out there?
We've seen some great successes in some states like Florida and places like Arizona, places like Michigan, that are really taking this seriously and implementing full language assistance programs by their primary election dates. which is really, really encouraging. Recently, we had some great wins in the state of Michigan, where Hamtramck and Dearborn cities became the first in the nation to provide Arabic ballots and materials to all its voters. And then on the primary, we saw that Collier and Clyde townships, which were required to provide Spanish ballots to its voters, were in compliance with the law and did so in the primaries that were just like a week ago. So this is really exciting. We're seeing a lot of progress, and we're very optimistic that by the November general election, we're going to see almost all of the new jurisdictions reach full compliance. There are some places, of course, that are not compliant. These jurisdictions are attempting to do the bare minimum of what they're supposed to do. Oftentimes just translating ballots, using Google Translate to translate materials. And we know how that goes, Bob, right? That is not fair for our community. That is not language justice. And we're going to hold them accountable. We are doing this research, we're doing this work because places that do not comply with the law are going to be referred to the Civil Rights Division of the Department of Justice, so they're held accountable. We're also going to engage in a full press strategy to make sure that people know, right, that their election officials are not providing the assistance they should, and that they're not complying with the Voting Rights Act of 1965. So these are some of the trends that we're seeing, but overall, we have seen that this committee, that this coordination, that this effort by all the groups, partners like you, Bob, are pushing language access forward. And by November, I'm really excited to see that so many counties that never provided anything in terms of language access before are going to do so. And it is because of all of our work in the past couple months.
What messages and or actions would you like to convey to communities that are concerned about language access?
The first one is, if you're seeing stories or you're witnessing violations of language access, you need to share those. You need to share those stories of wins and also violations with groups like Bob, groups like the Language Justice Committee, groups like Building Back Together, to make sure that we are working with those places to help them do better, but also to hold them accountable. Second, talk to your election officials and elected officials, right? Make sure that they're hearing from you how important this is for you, for your family, for your neighbors, and that they have to, you want to see them do this or they're going to lose your support. Third, we need to make sure that the people that are investing in the democracy movement, I'm talking about funders, donors, philanthropy, is recognizing the importance of this issue in the greater democracy space and properly investing in it. I've seen mixed results, Bob, to be honest, and we need folks to invest more money for longer term in this work. And that is my hope with everything that we're doing. The research, the results that we're going to see in 2022 is drive more funding to organizations like ours to be able to continue this work, but also increase its capacity and scope. And lastly, if you're not yet in the Language Justice Committee, please reach out, join us, and let's do some good work together.
That's what a great message, and those are definitely actionable items that everybody can take part in. Before I sign us off here, any last comments or things that you wanted to mention before we wrap up?
Just that it's been a pleasure working with you, Bob, and your organization under the leadership of Christine. You all are doing amazing work to make sure that your community civil rights, voting rights are protected. And I truly admire everything that you do. And I think this series is great to inform donors, nonprofits, activists, and anybody interested in an obscure but very important area for our communities. We all have family and friends who either don't speak English as their first language, just got to this country, and need a little help so they can vote independently, effectively, and with dignity And I'm excited to continue working with you, Bob.
Well, thank you so much for your time today and enlightening us about the incredible work you're doing through the committee. And we appreciate your educating us a little bit more about language access and the importance in the voting rights context. Thank you so much, Ruben.
Thank you so much, Bob, for having me here.